love it when we plan a trip. We get to book the flight, pick the hotel, start thinking about where we'll eat. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And it is all great. That is, until it gets canceled due to some reason like a pandemic or something.
Yeah.
And of course, we get all frustrated and sad. This reminds me of something that happened in my life. When we went to India for a vacation during Christmas, we had so much fun. But when we finally had to leave, we were so sad. And when we headed to that airport, our flight was delayed. And so we had to sit in that airport and wait and wait and wait. And that frustration just grew as that delay continued. I was thinking, we prayed about this trip, the flight, and everything. Why is all of this still happening? Eventually, the flight got canceled and we had to rebook the flight. But that meant we got 10 additional days to spend in India. What a blessing that was. What seemed to be an inconvenience at first turned out to be a blessing. Many times we make these plans in our hearts, but at times they may not turn out like what we want. But don't be discouraged. My first point today is that God has a plan for you. In Genesis 37 through 50, we read about the life of a young man named Joseph. Joseph was the youngest, but he was the most favored son of Jacob. His brothers kinda hated him though. Now Joseph had a dream, a literal dream where his brothers' crops bowed down to him, and another dream where the sun and the stars bowed down to Joseph. Now, when his brothers learned about this dream, it only stirred their hatred. And so it happened one day, when Joseph went out to his brothers in the field, instead of killing him, which was in their minds, they threw him into a well, and then they sold him as a slave to Potiphar, an Egyptian official. Could I tell you, when we want to honor God with our lives, the enemy will always try and bring us down. But we need to remember that God has great plans for us. As Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." And like Joseph, we do not want to lose out. You see, Joseph not only had dreams, but God would help Joseph interpret these dreams. And while Joseph was in prison, he could not see how God was going to use this in his life. But Joseph, as to become a hero of land and save the land of Egypt from a famine, this would also lead to Joseph becoming second in command in Egypt. Can I tell you, God's plans are always marvelous and beyond our imagination. Amen?
Amen.
Now my second point today is that God is working his plan. You see, as Joseph's story continues, we find out that his brothers come to Egypt to collect some food because the famine was widespread at this point. And it was here that one of the early dreams Joseph had was fulfilled. His brothers are bowing before him as they come to ask for grain. And who knows how God just might use you in your world. That is why we should keep a right heart before God, so that God can use us when he needs us. Whenever we feel like everything around us is just going wrong, we need to remember that God knows exactly what he's planning for us. And as he promised in Psalm 32:8, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you." God will work out his plan. We just need to trust in him. In Joseph's life, God's plan was not only to protect Joseph or honor him, but it was to use him to save several lives of the people in Egypt. When you submit to God's plan, he will use you mightily to save others. So I challenge you today to keep your heart toward God and trust in him, because God's got a great plan for you, and God is working that plan. A plan that has more hope and more future than you and me could ever imagine. God bless you.